Please rise for the invocation and flag salute.
Thank you. As we celebrate in 2016 150 years together as a city, give us time in this year to remember what makes our city great, vision to see ourselves as even better, and desire to make our community the best it can be. We are blessed to live in a beautiful, bountiful city. May we remember that as we struggle through everyday mundanity. And may we build ourselves strong for the next 150 years. Thank you, and happy early spring.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome to the City Council meeting of Thursday, February 4th, 2016. Next item on our agenda is approval of City Council minutes dated 1/21/16. Can I have a motion for approving those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
With motion and second, any discussion, questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on the motion.
Ms. Mealy.
Yes.
Mr. Noviello.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Dr. Williamson.
Yes, and the motion, the minutes are approved. Next item on the agenda is limited courtesy of the floor. We've had no request for that this evening, and so we'll move on to presentation by the police officers in celebration, I think, of our retirees. Chief Forsman, how are you this evening?
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, President Williamson and members of the City Council. We're here tonight to recognize 3 officers who have recently retired from the Williamsport Police Department. One, unfortunately, was unable to be here tonight, but I'm going to bring the 2 up that are here. The first one, and I'll bring them up by the most senior. The first one will be Lieutenant Arnold Duck, who has 33 years of service. The other one who's here tonight with us is Captain Michael Orwig, who has 30 years of service. Mike, if you would join us up here at the podium, thanks. And the last one is Officer Jimmy Rogers, who retired with 15 years of service. I thought it would be fitting tonight to go down memory lane a little bit and share a few changes that have occurred over the years. And as you can see, there's a lot of experience that is leaving our department. As I was putting some of my thoughts together for some comments tonight, it hit me. I was like, wow, 30 years. That's a lot. Has changed over a seemingly long period of time, when in fact it just seems like yesterday. I'd like to share some of those changes with those of us who have been here over this period of time, truly understand and maybe even get a good laugh out of this. This department has evolved greatly in the way we do business. We no longer handwrite our reports, and probably for a good reason, as it seems as though no one knows how to handwrite a report any longer if it's without a keypad. Computers are now in all our patrol cars, which enables officers to get information they rely on persons we deal with faster than ever before. It also gives us the ability to write and send reports without having to leave our vehicles. The previous way that we used to do reports was to handwrite your report in your patrol vehicle, if it wasn't a report that required criminal charges, that is. And if there were criminal charges, forget about the ability to cut and paste like we can now. This entailed putting it on a form for criminal charges in an electric typewriter, thank goodness just for that. These charges were typically quadruplicate pages, and if you messed it up, you would take the form out and start all over again. Not push, delete, back tab, or correct your error. We don't use ink any longer to take people's fingerprints. That too has come into the digital age, and we were glad of that. Taking people's fingerprints when we used to use the ink system was at times extremely difficult. Then to find out if a person was being dishonest about who they were, we would have to send fingerprint cards off to the lab, have the fingerprint card read by an expert, then to compare it to who knows how many other fingerprints, and send us the results, which typically was about 3 to 5 months. Today, we take people's fingerprints without even getting their fingers dirty. And in less than 30 minutes, we had the results back as to whom the person is and who is trying to hide their identity. All officers now have their own individual portable radios. There had been a time that you were issued a portable radio at the start of your shift and you had to turn it in at the end of your shift. As you can see, there has been many changes and there are so many more. Just wanted to take the officers back in time to relive some of the things that have changed. And when you talk about law enforcement changing and telling it is for their own benefit, the fights that come along with it until they actually see how most changes are for the better. So tonight I wanted to acknowledge Lieutenant Duck, who has played an instrumental role of how this department currently processes crime scenes. Lieutenant Duck took an interest early on in his career to attend various schools for fingerprint identification and crime scene processing. This department has benefited extremely from Lieutenant Duck's expertise in this area and has helped to change the way this department currently conducts various investigations from an evidence and processing standpoint. Lieutenant Duck has been one to teach other officers of the importance of processing a crime scene and the collection of evidence for these scenes, has assisted this department with providing additional training to help officers to be proficient. Lieutenant Duck has also been an instructor at the Mansfield University Municipal Police Officers Academy. I also like to acknowledge some accomplishments of Captain Michael Orwig. Captain Orwig has been a solid leader with this department in every role he has been promoted to or assigned to. Captain Orwig was also the longest-standing member and team leader of the Bureau Special Response Team. Captain Orwig has played a role in the advancement of the SRT team since the time of its creation and evolution. The SRT team plays a vital role when dealing with high-profile incidents that had to be dealt with expeditiously to ensure the utmost safety to the community. And Officer Rogers' contribution to the Williamsport Bureau of Police has been as a patrol officer his whole career. With this, possesses a vast knowledge of the city and the people with whom he dealt with on a daily basis. Officer Rogers' knowledge of the different neighborhoods and the problems that persisted gave him an advantage when it became necessary to deal with the persons who created the problems. Officer Rogers was also very mindful of the many situations and was quick to direct officers to the areas needed so that these situations could be dealt with in the safest manner. Officer Rogers, too, himself, also taught at the Municipal Police Officer Academy at Mansfield University. It has been my honor to have worked with each of these officers over the many years that they have been with the Bureau. These officers have dedicated themselves and their time for the betterment of the city, giving up time with their families, at times missing special occasions, holidays, days off, vacation, and so much more. With that being said, I'd be amiss if I didn't acknowledge, take a moment to recognize all the loved ones of these officers who have given their support to these officers so that they could do their jobs without the worry of taking care of their families. Sometimes we forget the vital role of our spouses and other family members that assist in our everyday lives. So for that, I say thank you to all the family members. In closing, there are many accomplishments that each of these officers have done throughout their careers that have not been mentioned. I would personally like to extend my sincere appreciation and gratitude to each of these officers for their dedication of duty, the sacrifices that they make, and the contributions that they've had, which has made the city of Williamsport a better community. I've known these officers a long time. They're very special friends of mine, especially Captain Orwig. He came on the department the same day I did. As you can tell, I'm kind of sad to see him go. But we have a plaque for each one of them, and I'd like to present them with the plaques that we have got for them. Excuse me for a second. So with that, certificate of service presented to Arnold Duck Jr. in grateful recognition of your 30 years of faithful and dedicated service to the Williamsport Bureau of Police and to the citizens of Williamsport. February 7th, 1983 to January 1st, 2016. Thank you, sir. Second, certificate of service presented to Michael E. Orwig in grateful recognition of your 30 years of faithful service and dedication to the Williamsport Bureau of Police and to the citizens of Williamsport, January 17th, my date, 1986, to January 4th, 2016. At this time, if either one of them would like to say a few words, I'll give them the podium.
Thank you. Members of council, I'm no stranger. I wish to thank my friends, Greg Forsman, Chief, Assistant Chief Tim Miller, and my protege, Captain Jody Miller, as well as the other chiefs I have served under, to include at least 7 mayors and at least 24 council men and women. It has been a privilege. I have been a privileged person to serve the many capacities in the city police department, although it did not come as a sacrifice. In my years now, thinking of my family, I recall the nights, weekends, and holidays I have worked or was called into work due to the demands of the job or the positions I have held, as well as the needs of our citizens in 30 years that they have been countless. I, as well as others, consider this career as the most important in my life. And with that, I gave my utmost, my trust, and steadfastness, and did the best I could. I, as you do, Councilman and Mayor, do not do this for privilege or position, but do it for the betterment of the real citizens of this community. I am one of those. I always have been and always will be. I am not a naysayer, as someone in the press is, or is living elsewhere and scrutinizes city politics or police, as some unfortunately read in the articles in the paper. I have a vested interest here as a citizen such as yourselves. And my daughters do too. We all live here. I am truly grateful to you, all of you, and for the citizens and my police department and those that have served and continue to serve in one of the most toughest positions to be in, and that is a uniformed police officer of this city. This is a position which I will always be proud of to represent and to be a part of. Thank you so very much.
Mike pretty much summed it up. I'm one of very few words, always have been, but it's been a true honor to serve this city for 33 years. There's been a lot of changes, mostly for the better, and between my family, who supported me my whole career, without them I would have never been able to do what I've been able to do with the department. And I'm just hoping I've left things a little better than what they were when I came. And I thank all of you and the citizens for allowing me to hold such a position. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. And before I open it up for additional comments, let me just, on behalf of council, express our and the citizens of Williamsport's heartfelt thank you for all 3 of your service and the dedication and effort and the hours and the years and the decades that you've put into doing exactly what you both just expressed your goals were, making the city a better place, and for doing it with the attitude that you expressed, that was your sincere hope and aim each day to leave the job, the department, the city better off than the day before. And so just in general, let me thank you on behalf of everyone in the city of Williamsport for that service. Other comments or questions from members of council? Councilman Smith.
Again, I want to thank both of these men for the long service that they have given to the city. I had the opportunity to work with Captain Orwig as chair of the Public Safety Committee. We had a relationship where we had meetings upon certain subjects and so forth, and I always felt that Captain Orwig was very confident in the work he did. He was extremely knowledgeable when I asked questions concerning things that we needed to know. And I just feel that after that many years of service, we certainly want to thank you. And we appreciate all that you've done for the city, and we really hate to see you leave. Now, I have not had the opportunity to work with Lieutenant Duck, so I'm not familiar, but I do want to thank he and his family for all the years of service that he's given to the city. We do appreciate it very much, sir. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Ms. Noviel.
Probably little I can say that could equate to your service to the city. I think for the remainder of us on council and those of us sitting here presently, we could easily say that their longevity of service simply speaks for itself. We're talking about true dedication here. Not as common today as maybe we would like it to be. We're very fortunate in that regard. They themselves should certainly be proud of that service, much in the same way that we all here are proud of that service. And I also thank you again, both for that diligence and that dedication to our city.
Others? Ms. Beard?
Going down the line, I suppose I should first say amen to all of that, and thank you very much, gentlemen. We have been fortunate as a city, especially to have two men of integrity and dependability who have worked with us for 30 years. You will be hard to replace on our force, and we very much appreciate your time and your dedication. Thank you.
Ms. Katz?
Thank you just doesn't seem to say it all, because you've sacrificed so much all these years, all of you. And I also want to thank the families, because there was a lot that you had to sacrifice also for us to have these fantastic men. So thank you all very much for everything that you've done over the years.
As a young man, it's so important for me to see examples like this of years of service and dedication and faithfulness. And it's a great example to me, and I think it's entirely appropriate for us to lift these men up as examples to our children as well, in a society that is lacking that type of faithfulness. So we are very thankful, and we hope to see that type of dedication lived out in our own generations and the generations to follow. So thank you for giving us that example that we need so desperately today.
Mr. Ellis?
Well, we're seeing a transition with these three officers leaving with so much experience. I think I added it up, 78 combined years of experience. But broken down individually into each of their lives, it's incalculable to measure all that they've given. And we are all so grateful that we've had men of integrity and capable men that are models as leaders. We have new officers coming in tonight, and we've hired several. There's a lot of that transition going on throughout the country as one generation is moving on. I'm not a young man. I'm one of the older guys, so I know what it was like years ago. And as Chief Forsman was sharing about the things that have changed as far as procedurally and the things that you do, I thought about the analogy of how things have changed for teachers over the years, that 30, 40 years ago, all they had to worry about as far as misbehavior was kids chewing gum or cutting class or going outside to skip class and smoke a cigarette. Those were the big offenses back then. And much the same in society when these gentlemen came on. The vast majority of people obeyed the law, wanted to obey the law, and raised families that wanted to obey the law. But things have changed drastically over a generation. And who would have ever thought we'd see the challenges that in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, that you've seen over the last 10 to 15 years. But it's here, and we have to deal with it. And you've set a standard for those who are coming behind you to deal with those things. So again, we're very grateful and thankful for all you've meant and done for us.
And without repeating all of that, let me finally say we wish you well. I wish you well on the next stage of life, whatever that brings. I hope it is as fulfilling as I hope the last 30 plus years have been for you both. I'm sure the contributions that you will bring to that next step will make a lasting impression there as it has here for the city of Williamsport. So once again, thank you so much. The next item on the agenda, we're going to move around a little bit, and I think it's a fitting transition to go from a thank for service well done to begin to think then about the next generation and the model that was set before them and that they will build upon and improve upon. And so the next, we're going to jump down to number 10 on our agenda, which is a resolution authorizing the Williamsport Bureau of Police to hire 2 new officers. Mrs. Frank, could you read the resolution, please?
Authorizing the Williamsport Bureau of Police to hire 2 officers. Whereas police officer candidates Christopher Salisbury and Nicholas Carita have completed the written testing, background examination, polygraph examination, medical examination, psychological testing, and all other required testing in accordance with the requirements set forth by the Williamsport Bureau of Police hiring procedures. Whereas, being that police officer candidates Christopher Salisbury and Nicholas Carita have completed all requirements set forth by this department, their employment with the city will commence on Monday, February 8th, 2016. At that time, they will begin their Act 120 police officer training at the Lackawanna Police Academy in Scranton, PA. Be it hereby resolved that the City Council of the City of Williamsport authorizes the Williamsport Bureau of Police to hire the above-listed individuals as police officers for the Williamsport Bureau of Police. This hiring is being made in accordance with procedures established by the City of Williamsport Police Civil Service Board and the Williamsport Bureau of Police.
Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second on that resolution, please?
So, second.
With a motion and a second, Chief Forsman.
Thank you again, President Williamson, and meet your replacements. The resolution you have before you is for authorization to hire 2 officers for the Williamsport Bureau of Police. These candidates have completed all the requirements set forth by the Police Civil Service Commission and the hiring practices for the Williamsport Bureau of Police. If authorized by City Council tonight, these candidates will commence their employment with the Williamsport Bureau of Police effective 8 February 2016. Attached, you have my letter requesting your consideration to hire these candidates. Also attached with this resolution is a copy of the current hiring list and where the candidates have placed. I'll have Captain Jody Miller introduce these candidates for consideration and give you a brief biography of them.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure tonight to honor 2 veteran police officers. At the same time, I'd like to celebrate tonight the beginning of 2 new police careers. So if I could have Christopher Salisbury come up. Police officer candidate Christopher Salisbury is 23 years old and is currently residing in Montoursville, Pennsylvania. He is the son of David and Marilyn Salisbury of Jameson, PA. Christopher graduated from Central Bucks High School in Doylestown in 2011. He is a recent graduate of the Pennsylvania College of Technology, completing the Residential Construction Technology program in 2015. Christopher is currently an EMT working for Susquehanna Health and is also a volunteer in the Montoursville Fire Department. With his appointment this evening, he will begin his Act 120 Police Academy training at the Lackawanna Police Academy in Scranton, Pennsylvania on Monday, February 8th. He is ranked number 17 on our current civil service list, and upon his return, he'll be badge number 13. Nicholas Carita. Police officer candidate Nicholas Carita is also 23 years old, currently residing in Loyalsock Township, Pennsylvania. He's the son of Nicholas and Barbara Carita. Nicholas graduated from Loyalsock High School in 2012. He has been a full-time student at the Pennsylvania College of Technology, completing both courses in general studies and accounting. With his appointment this evening, he'll begin his Act 120 Police Academy training at Lackawanna Police Academy in Scranton, PA on Monday, February 8th. He's currently ranked number 19 on the civil service list, and upon his return, he'll be Officer 21.
That's all further we have. Any other questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
In this case, we don't often send the hiring of officers to committees, but in this case, because it was a little bit of different situation, I believe it was reviewed both by Public Safety and by the Finance Committee, and so I'll send it over to Mr. Smith for a report from Public Safety first.
This was brought to the Public Safety Committee on Tuesday of this week. And as most of you well know, the first few days into January of this year, we had a homicide. Within a few days, knowing how this homicide occurred and knowing that Williamsport is a small city with big city crime. We have to face that. It's no secret that it's listed on some data that you can find very easily on the internet that our nickname is Little Philly. That's quite a nickname for a very small city, excuse me, like Williamsport. We have to deal with big city crime using big city tactics. We can no longer utilize ways that have been done previously. And we see the type of crime that was committed in early January. Several of us on City Council, and perhaps all of us, have looked and said, we really need to do something at this point in time. This is January. What's going to happen later in the spring, when we hit summer months, and in the fall? We had an opportunity to be able to hire additional officers at this time due to the list of the civil service available people. We don't always have that luxury. There are times when we don't have enough on a civil service list. It also fell into place that on February the 8th, another police academy course was going to begin. So we had an opportunity at this point, and we said, well, how are we going to pay for this? And of course, what we do on the Public Safety Committee is we make the recommendations and ask the Finance Committee to find the money. And hopefully, they're capable of locating the money when we want to do a project like this. I'm not going to go into some of the tactics that are going to be used when these officers come back. or before that time for obvious security reasons. However, there are going to be things that have been used in the past that we know have worked. And I know that our police department is going to be working toward that end. It seems as though that several people in the community have spoken. There's been an editorial in our local paper that have said, what are we doing? We're just hiring 2 more cops to put out on the beat. How's that going to help crime? A lot of people seem to think 2 more police aren't going to help. Well, it is going to help, because that's not the whole story. And sometimes I become bothered by things that are said out on the street and also in the newspaper when people don't have all the facts put together. And no, we're not going to sit here and reveal all the facts of what's going to happen. The community is going to have to trust our judgment. And I know that we had a tax increase. We're all aware of that. We all live in the city of Williamsport that are on city council. We pay the same taxes. We raised our own taxes. But I also know that when we have a crime problem like we've seen, we have to deal with it. We're not going to have economic development come to this town unless we can control the crime. That's one of the things that companies look at when they come into a community. What assets do you have in the community that can help us? One of the things is we have 2 local colleges that can produce a lot of intelligent people. But they also look at housing and they look at the crime. And if those numbers and numbers of homicides and assaults are at a certain level, they become disappointed and may not locate in the city. We know that has happened previously. So despite what you read and what you hear, that 2 more officers aren't going to make a hoot of difference, I'm going to tell you that they are. Because with a complement that we will have, we will be able to do and fight big city crime in a small town. The Public Safety Committee voted with a positive recommendation to send it to full council with their approval for hiring these 2 additional officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Mealy from Finance.
So Finance, as I'm assuming Public Safety did have a rather lengthy discussion about this particular item on the agenda.
Move it. Yes, sir.
Finance had a rather lengthy discussion about this particular item on the agenda, and thank you very much to both Assistant Chief Miller and Chief Forsman for your thorough presentation on Tuesday. In the end, these 2 candidates are, we understand that they're extremely dedicated candidates and show a lot of promise, and we are happy that we were able to move quickly to bring them into the police force while they're both available. The exciting part about hiring them now is that they'll be able to start at the police academy here in just a few days. Monday, as I understand. Gentlemen, have a good last weekend. And that means that right around the time that that our new chief steps in here in the city, we'll have 2 new officers, and we'll be able to provide him with a full complement at that point in time of 53 officers, including Chief Forsman. However, it is worth noting that in terms of Finance's determination of available funding and funding for this, for these 2 new hires, part of that is predicated on the fact that we are looking at 2 possible retirements within the city throughout the rest of the year. Finance will continue to sort of delve into the financing strategies before we determine exactly how much funding will need to be transferred to the police line item to finish out the salary line item to finish out the rest of the year in the black. However, it is likely that by the end of this year, we will probably be back to 51 in the department, and that will make the definitive increase to 53 a decision for 2017's budget process. And that will involve a long, hard look at our finances and our taxes and our income for the coming year. But we are, We can certainly say that proactive hiring in the case of the police department and maintaining our complement at a minimum of 51 is the first step to proactive policing within the police department. And therefore, we are grateful that the police department brought these individuals to our attention now. And I at least am extremely excited to see you guys join our force. And all of finance felt that way. We feel finance forwarded it to the full body of council with a positive recommendation.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Noviello.
Just, again, as a member of the Public Safety Committee, we have an opportunity to get sometimes a little bit deeper look into some of the circumstances the city's facing. From my perspective, this was not a hard sell. These hirings have become, in my mind, a necessity for the city to address crime in that proactive manner. I'm happy these gentlemen have offered their services to the city. It's not something that we see as often as we probably would like. Hopefully they will serve as long as those we've just honored have served. And again, I thank them and wish them a safe and productive tenure with the city of Williamsport. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Allison?
I'm on finance. Councilwoman Neely and Councilwoman Katz. And we did crunch the numbers, but a couple, not dollar numbers, that we did talk about. And these were provided by Assistant Chief Miller. As far as our complement in numbers of officers, in 2012 we had 50, 2013 46, 2014 48, in 2015 45 to 48. So for various number of reasons, some of which definitely are not our fault because the way the list works and how you keep it filled and when you can start a new list, and the numbers that are qualified off of that list all go into to affecting that number. But in any case, as we get to 53 and 51 throughout the year, that's going to give us 5 to 6 additional officers that we've had for the last few years. So it is going to be a significant increase. And it is going to enable us to have other capabilities. I think we're anticipating what can be accomplished, and the professionals have given us their view on what can be accomplished. I just don't want to put a lot of pressure on them to come up with numbers immediately, because it's not going to happen that way. We need to understand, just as it's been a process for us to get up to this point. Well, here's another number I wanted to share that we found out. We have about 16 officers now with 2 years or less experience. So if you add that up, suppose they all had 2, you have 16. That's 32 years experience. And Lieutenant Trump sat with his career. So, just to...
Took 16 to replace him.
Yeah, just to give you a perspective on, now that they can take the place of more experienced men that can do things, but it's still going to be somewhat of a process. We are definitely committed to attacking this problem in every way that it can be attacked, that we can be successful in getting control of some of these areas again. Then we did talk about the dollars, and we're going to basically monitor the budget and how things are working out as the year goes through, and we'll have a pretty good idea, midway through the year, what we may be looking at before the budget even comes up. So all the council will be apprised of that and have plenty of time to think about it and work on how we're going to approach that issue.
Since it took 16 to replace Mr. Duck, can I have 15 more to replace Captain Orwig?
Mr. Henderson.
I just wanted to point out, also being on the Public Safety Committee, that we did have a lot of discussion, and I think it's important to note that the philosophy behind hiring more officers is not one of a reaction to past crimes, but one of a proactive approach to deter future crime. And that's very important. We're not just reacting to things that are happening. We're being mindful of the direction of our country and of the very real challenges that we have. And so this is a proactive approach, and we've heard that from several members of council already. And I just wanted to point that out. That is the philosophy here, not just reaction to what we've seen in the past, but we want to hit this head on to prevent crime in the future.
Mrs. Katz.
I just think we're all just very excited that we finally are reaching a full complement. We've tried for so long to reach that. I know, Chief, you have tried in many different areas, and your hands are tied in so many different areas. So we're really excited about all the new hires. It's going to be incredible to see everybody in full force out here. It does take a while for you guys to get on the street and working after you get out of the academy, but it's going to be great. And just as Councilman Henderson said, it's a proactive action that we're doing here, and I think we're all going to be very happy, and especially with the new chief coming in too, with everybody working together. I think the city is in for a lot of surprises, and good surprises. And thank you very much for all the work you've done, all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and let me add my comments. When the mayor first approached council and myself to talk about this idea, one of the things that we had in our discussion is, for years now, council has budgeted, 51, the equivalent amount of money to pay for 51 officers. But that's on a piece of paper, and that's in a bank account, I suppose. But it's a very different thing to actually go through all of the steps it requires, and there are a lot of steps as we've learned over the years to make sure that all the candidates are vetted in an appropriate way and get them hired and then get them trained and then get them on the force and on the street in a fully productive capacity. And so while 51 is a number on paper that we've had out there for a long time, as Mr. Allison has pointed out, it's been a struggle to get there and stay there. And so when the mayor came to me and came to council, I think we all thought of this as a very proactive, a very aggressive, appropriately so, a change in hiring strategy that will allow us to spend more of 2016 at a full complement. We're not currently making a decision to grow the force in a permanent way, but instead we're taking advantage of the place where we are on a list, as someone earlier mentioned, and our ability to identify 2 highly qualified candidates, from all I've been told, gentlemen, who are, at some point, employers need to strike while the iron's hot when highly qualified employees are available, and with a timing of a police academy that it's either now or it's 3 or 4 months from now. And with a change in the chief on the horizon, I think we all thought it was appropriate to make sure that transition in leadership occurs in which all of the tools that we've always tried to keep in place are in place as much as possible and as much as we have already budgeted in our mind. Now, that proactive hiring practice that the mayor and his command staff have brought to us will have a cost associated with it, if only because there's some overlap between the money going out in one way and the money going out in another way. And I know finance is working on calculating those exact numbers in cooperation with the mayor's administration. We also, striking while the iron is hot, in that our bottom line is not great, but it is better than we feared it would be at the end of budget season just a few months ago because of the Supreme Court ruling related to the business privilege tax. Now, we continue to have a lot of discussions on what's the appropriate use of those additional revenue, and I think I've heard many of my colleagues suggest that one of the most appropriate uses is to create fiscal stability going into 2017's budget, which is to say we shouldn't let it all burn a hole in our pocket and be ready to spend it in ways that won't have lasting effects. But I think I've also heard my colleagues suggest that this is a high priority area, and if some proactive hiring practices will cost us a few dollars so that we have that full complement in place, then that gives us some time, as Ms. Mealy was talking about, to see exactly what is the appropriate number that we can afford to try to make some of this move a more permanent move. Maybe with later on making the decision to grow what we've complemented 51 budgetarily to something larger in 2017. But in essence, this is the right move now, and it gives us time to be very deliberate about making our next move in conjunction with the transition in leadership and with some new strategies that Mr. Smith alluded to. So as I told the mayor when we first discussed it, I think this is a good idea and a right move for where we are at the moment. And I think, without putting the pressure on, I think it will make a measurable difference once we have an opportunity to look back at this decision down the road. So thank you to the mayor and his command staff for generating the idea, and other colleagues on council for, it sounds like, supporting it.
I will just, I don't want to be a buzzkill, but I will just notify you in an effort to be forthcoming with information. Another officer today approached me and had indicated that there's a very strong possibility that he may be retiring, totally unexpected. Law enforcement today is not what it used to be. These gentlemen here lasted 30-some years, and I'm here to tell you, it's a tough business. It is a thankless job, and sometimes you just get sick and tired of it. So there's no way to predict when somebody's going to have that bad day and walk in and say, you know what, I'm done. Today, that was total surprise to me for that officer to come and say that. So I just want to throw that out there, that we may be back sooner than we had expected. These are things you just can't plan for, and things that we got to deal with to keep the city moving forward. So just wanted to inform you of that little piece of information to kind of keep everybody informed.
And we were having so much fun.
We'll be back next week.
And I think, you know, the communications that we've had over this issue is continuing moving forward to figure out how, one, we can afford things, and two, we can be proactive so we stay very close to that number over time, is a model that's working, right?
Absolutely.
So if there are any further comments or questions, Mr. Allison?
If they're going to be back that soon, maybe Mrs. Frank can save our comments in the minutes, and we can just duplicate them so we can save time and get through the
You
meeting.
can save time, and I can have it regurgitated in mine too.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on the resolution authorizing the hiring.
Ms. Mealy,
Yes.
Mr. Noviello,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Katz.
Yes.
Mr. Henderson.
Yes.
Mr. Allison.
Yes.
Dr. Williamson.
Yes, and the resolution is approved. Gentlemen, congratulations first. Good luck starting next week second. Thank you for offering your services. And one of the things that was the tradition of the gentleman who sat in the seat immediately before me was to point out words on the side of our police vehicles. If I remember correctly, what he always said and what's on the side of the car is the task is to protect and serve, correct? And so protecting the citizens of Williamsport is one of your jobs, and serving the citizens of Williamsport is your other job. And while I don't know everything else that you will begin to learn next week that allows you to do that effectively, I do know that I send you off with that charge, that it is about protecting and it's about serving in each of the things that you do. So I look forward to working with you over in the coming years as you take on those two very, very important tasks for our city. So congratulations and thank you. And Mrs. Frank, you're going to be swearing them in now?
She could do Daystone too.
Yeah.
That I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this Commonwealth, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Get some coffee. They'll be back. Oh, there you go. I feel like we need to go to commercial, Chris.
Either that or one of us should get out there and do some sort of song and dance.
Lots of luck and welcome to our community.
It's about as much of a major transition.
Hi, nice to meet you. Congratulations.
Liz Mealy, nice to meet you. Liz, nice to meet you.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Do your best, guys.
Okay, sure. That's fine.
Always happy to see a couple of Penn College guys do good. Makes me feel good.
I was thinking about that.
Yes, you can. You can go ahead. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, you can. Lots of luck. Congratulations. I know, we are too. Which one is yours? Nicholas? Oh, Nicholas. It's going to be an exciting journey.
One thing that, guys,
Fantastic.
I think they may be done.
Thank you.
One thing that
Thank you
struck me
for
as
letting us have
they were
you.
talking during their retirements was the two of them started at the same day.
We do, we have your baby.
I don't know what must be running through your minds when they were saying that, and I don't know if you knew each other before this,
Yes,
but
it is.
that's kind
He
of,
looks
I mean,
like he's ready to
imagine
go.
30 years from now. Yeah. Well, good luck, and don't let them beat you up too much at Academy.
Fantastic.
All right, and see you soon.
So now it's happening.
And if you need anything, come
Now
talk
it's
to us.
happening.
Have a good time, guys. Enjoy the academy.
I don't know if the other guys would say that, though. They might.
Well, I think that was a pretty neat way to have a transition, both parts of the last two items.
It really was.
And it always makes me sad when the room clears that quickly. It's like nobody wants to be here for us, but I guess we should move on. The next item on the agenda is appointments. We have 2 appointments to the Planning Commission. Mr. Mayor.
Hello, City Council, Dr. President, Mr. Vice President, members of City Council. Before you, I have 2 individuals that I feel would be dynamic as 2 additions to the Planning Commission. And the first individual is David Stone, and the second individual is Cliff Reeders. And when it's time for me to proceed, I'd like to do that.
Sure, absolutely. Can I get a motion and a second on the appointments, please?
Second.
And Mr. Mayor, whatever you'd like to add.
Thank you. Concerning David Stone moved to Williamsport in 1975 to be plant engineer for Sylvania. Then he worked for PP&L and Larson Design. He's currently retired. He served on the Brandon Park Commission, Williamsport Area School Board. So, Vice President Allison, you must know Mr. Stone.
We did cross paths.
The STEP Board, YMCA Board, and he is currently the bicycle coordinator. And he's doing a wonderful job, and I believe with his expertise as an engineer and, of course, his love for biking will be a wonderful addition to the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Reeders as well?
Yes, and Mr. Reeders, of course, I believe most people know Cliff Reeders. He's a very well-known attorney in the city, smart, articulate, and a consensus builder. He was the lead negotiator in regards to the Coles development, so he was very instrumental in that. He's very active in his synagogue. He's worked hard to make Williamsport better, and I'm sure he will be a nice addition as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any comments or questions on the appointments? Mr. Allison.
And I also had the pleasure of serving on the STEP Board when Dave was president, and then he stepped down from president, but was still on there. So he's going to be a fine addition. I know he's a valuable asset to have working on behalf of the city.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Let me just say to Dave, neighbor, thank you for your service in all the ways that you serve, but in this instance, in this capacity, thank you for agreeing to serve on the Planning Commission. Hearing no other comments or questions, Ms. Frank, on the appointments.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the appointment is approved. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance designating Carolyn Bullock Pass in final reading. Mrs. Frank, in short form, please.
An ordinance designating Carolyn Bullock Pass.
Can I have a motion and a second on the ordinance and second reading?
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second. Comments or questions? Mr. Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to add on that one? Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank, on the ordinance and second reading.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance passes in second reading and will be in effect, I believe, in 20 days. Next item on the agenda then is an ordinance in final reading accepting the land from Cedarcog Joint Rail Authority located in the 11th Ward of the City of Williamsport. Ms. Frank, in short form.
An ordinance accepting land of the Cedarcog Joint Rail Authority being a portion of tax parcel 71-005-302 between Arch Street and Howard Street located in the 11th Ward of the City of Williamsport.
I can have a motion and a second on ordinance and final reading, please.
So move.
Second.
The motion is second. Mr. Crater, do you have anything to add on the ordinance?
Nothing more to add on this.
Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none, Ms. Frank, on the ordinance and second reading.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance carries in final reading. The next item on the agenda is an ordinance amending Article 183 of the Recreation Commission in final reading. Ms. Frank, in short form, please.
An ordinance amending Article 183 Recreation Commission and providing for creation of a new commission manner of appointment, limitation of power to make expenditures.
Have a motion and a second on the ordinance in final reading, please.
So move.
Second?
Hearing a motion and a second. Mr. Grado, I know you're a stand-in on this one. Do you have anything
Yes,
you'd like to add?
Justin had another commitment, and he had told me that there's nothing more to add. So,
All right, thank you. Comments or questions from members of council? Mrs. Katz.
This was corrected, because remember, we were having a correction on this, but we didn't get a new copy of it. On the second page, expenditures, we were correcting that, okay? The power and authority of Recreation Commission,
Shall not.
I am trying to figure out my handwriting.
Yeah, shall not is where it picks up
Okay,
again.
okay, yes, yes.
And Mrs. Frank, for the official copy, do you have that in corrected form?
The power and authority of the Recreation Commission shall not be construed to, nor shall the commission have any power or authority to make any expenditures.
Correct,
I have the
yes.
correct copy.
Good. Is that
Yes,
everything?
I just want to make sure that it was corrected.
Sure, absolutely. Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank on the ordinance in second reading.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Nubiallo?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the ordinance, this ordinance also carries in final reading. Next item on the agenda is resolutions for PUC application for railroad crossing upgrade. Mrs. Frank.
A resolution of the Council of the City of Williamsport, Lycoming County, authorizing PennDOT to request railroad crossing upgrades at Maynard Street, Arch Street, Depot Street, and Howard Street, City of Williamsport, from the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission.
Thank you. I can have a motion and a second on the resolution.
So move.
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, Mr. Grado.
yes, this resolution authorizes PennDOT to submit on behalf of the City of Williamsport a request to the PUC for the installation of improvements to the rail grade crossings at Maynard, Arch, Howard, and also the removal of the crossing at Depot Street. This is all part of the quiet zone establishment there as part of the Newberry improvements. These railroad grade improvements are 100% federally funded for both the engineering and construction, and it's part of a PennDOT safety program. So it would provide those sections of the 4 quad gates at Arch Street and Howard, and also improvements to the gates at Maynard. This was reviewed by the Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Smith from Public Works.
This came to Public Works on this past Tuesday, and as Mr. Grado pointed out, this is part of the Quiet Zone project, which we have been working on for, I guess, about 2.5 years now. We originally had 2 public meetings concerning the Quiet Zone, and decisions made on the closing of Depot Street and how the gates were going to, the gate system was going to change at both Howard Street and Arch Street. There had to be an application sent to the Public Utility Commission through PennDOT for this approval, and also there's approvals with the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration. So this indicates that the PUC will be advised of this, and when their approval is given, the funding will be coming from PennDOT and also from CEDACOG, the Joint Rail Authority, to change the gates, and then the quiet zone can be implemented. So this is just one of the steps along with many, many other parts of the process that had to be completed, but we're now starting to see light at the end of the railroad tunnel. Right, Mr. Grado?
Yes, that's correct.
And possibly, we could be seeing this project come to completion perhaps by the end of this year. Now that the applications are done We have been told the funding is in place through CEDACOG Joint Rail Authority and also through PennDOT. So the money is appropriated, and once the final approvals are all given from the agencies, they can then begin the construction process. This was voted on the positive to send it to full council with a positive recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Comments or questions from members of council? Ms. Noviello.
Just a quick follow-up to what Mr. Smith alluded to. What this is, I think, in my mind, is a really good example of how private citizens, government, groups like PennDOT, Joint Rail, and what have you, can actually work together and accomplish something that serves the general public, and in this case, also adds a few different safety amenities that maybe were not anticipated at the beginning of this process that came forward as this developed. So we want to thank Mr. Grado. I certainly want to thank those at CEDACOG and the Joint Rail Authority, those at PennDOT, and certainly those citizens who came forward in a respectful, courteous manner and addressed this concern exactly as it should have been done. And as they have come to see, and we pretty much well understand, government moves in rather slow increments. And that's been the case here, but we do see finally a coming fruition to this process. And I think that those folks in Newberry that have been looking for this are going to be happy. I don't know, do we call them Newberryans or Newberryites? Whatever you choose, I think they're going to be satisfied with the safety factor that we've been able to incorporate into this, and certainly that quiet zone is something that's been long sought after. So I feel good about the process, which isn't always the case, as we all know. In this case, it worked out in a way that I think benefits everyone that was involved.
Thank you, Mr. Noviello. Other comments or questions? Mr. Allison.
Well, a process that started because of a nuisance and complaints, I really think it's going to transform that corridor into something great, better rather than what was there. It's not just addressing the problem, but I mean, it's going to be upgraded, and we've been able to address some of the fire hydrants and other things in that area. So it's really a great improvement all across the board.
Absolutely. And in addition to the thanks that the other members shared for the citizens and Mr. Grado and others, I'd also like to thank the Public Works Committee, because I know that this has taken quite a bit of time and staying on top of it and helping to facilitate the process from the perspective of council. I appreciate their efforts on that as well. If there are no other comments or questions, then Ms. Frank on the resolution, please.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution carries. Next item on the agenda is resolution to accept proposal for economic development consulting between the city and Penn Strategies, LLC. Mrs. Frank, in short form, please.
Resolution to approve an agreement for economic development consulting services between the City of Williamsport and Penn Strategies, LLC.
Actually, could you finish reading that out, because it changed from the original version that it was in our packet.
Okay. Be it hereby resolved that the City Council of the City of Williamsport approve the attached agreement between the City of Williamsport and Penn Strategies, LLC for the amount not to exceed $150,000 for a 2-year period beginning February 1st, 2016 through January 31st, 2018. Be it further resolved by the City Council of the City of Williamsport that the said agreement include a 30-day termination clause, and any additional fees, expenses are subject to approval by the city.
Thank you, Ms. Frank. Motion and a second on the resolution.
So move.
Second.
With a motion and a second. Mr. Nichols, how are
Good
you this
evening.
evening?
I'm sorry.
How are you this evening?
Well, we talk later about that? I don't know.
We always do.
Good evening, members of council. This is a revised resolution which was distributed to replace the original resolution in your council packet and incorporates changes that were recommended by the Finance Committee at their meeting last Tuesday. And as I referenced in my memo, we just add language specific to the length of the contract fee, and other information. Also, you received a revised contract, which simply removed a sentence on the last page of the contract, which again was recommended by the Finance Committee.
And this one sentence was really not appropriate for a city contract, and I included a page where it redlined or whatever, so to speak, that sentence, and then the whole contract without that particular sentence. The Finance Committee did review this contract and scope of work, and it maintains the partnership that we have with Penn Strategies and the City of Williamsport for Economic Development Consulting Services. This is for a 2-year period for a fee not to exceed $150,000 or $75,000 annually. Jason Fitzgerald is the president of Penn Strategies, and he will serve as the city's main point of contact. And he's here this evening to answer any questions about the contract, the scope of work. And I see Phil is also here, and he will do a little dance later just to entertain the folks. So I'll defer back to Jason for any questions, and Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols. Council President, Mr. Vice President, members of council, it's been an honor and a privilege to work with the City of Williamsport for the last 3 years as your economic development consultant. And with your approval this evening, I'd like to request your approval this evening, and with that, would look forward to continuing to work with you to try and grow and expand the economy of the City of Williamsport. You can see here that we've laid out in our scope of services some goals. Obviously, the first being that we'll update and advance the city's economic development strategic priorities as identified in the most recent capital budget that you've approved, and also the city's 5-year capital improvement plan. We'll work with the administration and key stakeholders to implement priority projects that will include but are not limited to Trade and Transit 2, A, B, and C, Destination 2014, the Williamsport waterfront at Susquehanna State Park, Mulberry Street development, capital improvement to Bowman Field, levee maintenance program, storm and sewer upgrades, and any other capital projects and needs as they come up. Also, of course, as always, we will be working to identify and advocate on behalf of any funding applications that the City of Williamsport submits. We've had, over the past, some degree of success with that in conjunction with working with Laura Templeton and Ritu and others here at the city. Just we'll continue to do what we've been doing, and hope that we've been accessible and will continue to be. Councilman Henderson, certainly anytime that you need anything from us, the other members know this. Please reach out directly, and we try to get an answer to you as quickly as possible. So I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzgerald. Let me send it over to Ms. Mealy for a report from Finance.
Yes. Finance forwarded this to the full body of council with a positive recommendation. We discussed with Mr. Nichols, we've had a 2-year relationship at this point with Penn Strategies, as we've discussed, and we would actually have been in the middle of a contract, an existing contract with Penn Strategies, but we have modified that to this new number. And while we will miss the excellent work that Ritu has provided as a portion of the package, we are confident that we've taken some of the work in-house, and Penn Strategies will be able to be our facilitator here moving forward. Mr. Nichols, in terms of what the administration is prioritizing for Penn Strategies work over the course of the next year, of course, the levy, near and dear to all of our hearts, is right there at the top of the list, as well as the stormwater issues that we may be facing in the coming year. And the East 3rd Street area, both the Gateway and Old City, is also high at the top of their list in terms of seeking to acquire funding for us in all of those areas. With that, I would just say that the committee and the administration discussed that we have generally been pleased with Penn Strategies' performance so far. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and that we look forward to continuing 2-year relationship.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mealy. And I do want to point out that Ritu will be available to work in conjunction with us or in other capacities to assist with grant writing services and other things on an as-needed basis. So they will still be available to partner with us.
Great. Comments or questions from members of council? Hearing none. Ms. Frank on the resolution.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the resolution carries. Mr. Fitzgerald, thanks again for your service to the city, your organization service. We look forward to continuing the relationship. And while many of us talk to you on a regular basis in a variety of capacities, we, of course, look forward to our next formal, I think it's quarterly meeting,
Yes, sir.
as the contract does and has always outlined. So,
And I'm going to continue with the weekly updates. I do apologize that there were there was a little bit of a fall off in those because of a lack of activity on the budget, but I anticipate that, we'll continue to do that, even though that's not in the scope of the contract. We like to keep council informed of what we're doing on a weekly basis, as there are activities that are being completed during that time period.
and personally, I know that those have been useful to me to help keep up informed on the various projects as they unfold for the city. So I appreciate those as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Next item on our agenda, if I'm correct here, is certificates of appropriateness. Nobody corrected me. And so, Mr. Girardi.
Yes. Good evening, President Williamson and members of council. What I have before you is a certificate of appropriateness request for totem tattoo to erect a wall-mounted sign 2 foot tall by 8 foot long to be mounted to the exterior of the building. It will be externally illuminated with downlights that will shine down onto the sign. Okay, it is a wood sign. I gave you a copy of the size, color, look, and so forth. And there is one small picture that shows the actual location of that sign. If you see the word totem, T-O-T-E-M, that's where the sign will be located.
Okay. Thank you. Can I have a motion and a second on the certificate, please?
So moved.
Second.
With motion or second, comments or questions from members of council? Ms. Mealy?
The signage is very becoming. I was actually a little afraid that it was going to look a bit like that horror film scrawl on the building, and I thought, oh my goodness.
That's why I wanted to point that out.
That's right. And Totem has certainly been really a lovely business to have downtown. And these particular digs look very attractive. So what's occasioning the move? Just different quarters, or is there something
That would
proposed
have,
with the old structure?
we do have a representative, if she'd like to answer. I think they just moved to a different location. Maybe their lease was up and.
Oh, okay, excellent.
Yep.
Just curious as to sort of whether, but anyway, welcome to the new quarters. I'll be walking past your place often.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, Ms. Frank on the certificate.
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and the certificate is approved. Next item on the agenda is accept for filing. We have the Brandon Park Commission meeting minutes of November 17th, 2015, Recreation Commission meeting minutes of January 11th, 16, Shade Tree Commission meeting minutes of 11/17/2015, Public Works meeting minutes of October 20th, 15, Public Safety Committee meeting minutes of December 1st, 15, Finance meeting minutes of December 15th, 15, and the Controller's Report of December 2015. Can I have a motion and a second to accept these for filing?
So moved.
Second.
Hearing motion and a second. Any questions or comments on the reports? Hearing none, Mrs. Frank?
Ms. Mealy?
Yes.
Mr. Noviello?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mrs. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Allison?
Yes.
Dr. Williamson?
Yes, and those are accepted for filing. Next item on the agenda is announcements. City Council will be holding an executive session on the issue of personnel immediately following this meeting. The next regularly scheduled City Council meeting will be held on Thursday, February 18th at 7:30 in City Hall Council Chambers. Other upcoming meetings include Monday, February 8th at noon is the Planning Commission meeting with a couple new members. At 4 p.m. is the Recreation Commission meeting. On Wednesday, February 10th at 3:30 is the O&E Pension meeting. Tuesday, February 16th is Blighted Property. At 10, at 12 is Public Works. At 3:30 is Finance. And at 6:30 is the HARB meeting. On Thursday, February 18th at 10:30 a.m. is Zoning Hearing Board, and at 4 p.m. is the Board of Health. That brings us to the end of our agenda this evening. Do I have comments or questions from members of council? Mr. Smith.
It's my distinct privilege to make an announcement this evening. It is Mr. Noviello's 50th birthday.
If only.
So if you would see him this evening, I think it would be highly recommended to wish him a happy birthday. May I be the first.
Thank you.
I think you should sing happy birthday, Smash.
I spoke to Mr. Nichols and let him understand that I've had about 40 years of experience at being 21 years old. So we'll leave it at that.
I know what it means when my students have been 21 years old. Any other comments or questions from members of council? Mayor, for you and your administration?
Yes, first of all, happy birthday, Councilman Noviello.
Thank you. Yes, me and Jack Benny.
And the other comment is, I'd like to compliment Councilwoman Mealy and her family in regards to the new addition that we see in the historic district.
That was my mom's crazy idea. Don't look at me.
Tell mom that we said thank you, and we're sure in short time, that project is going to be fabulous. So thank you again.
Thank you. Anything else from the administration?
I can talk a little bit about,
Mr. Anderson?
yeah, I can talk a little bit about the Highmark and the merger. We're still having problems with different aspects of the merger. As I was talking to Dr. Williamson, just when you thought it was over, you probably have received 3 sets of cards. The third set now that you've received says that now you do not have a primary care provider. And so we're in the throes of working through that. One of the other issues that came up as late as today was that now the pharmacies are having trouble connecting with Highmark. So Highmark has been working and they seem to have things cleared on their end, but now the pharmacy computer system is not coordinating with Highmark. So it's one thing after another. I'm continuing to work the issues personally with people in my office as well as over the phone. So as people have problems, they've been directed to call me directly and I'm addressing them as best we can. I'm waiting to hear from Benecon at this point in time to see what their advice is to people before I put out a generic message to everybody. But at this point, as the issues arise, I'm addressing them one-on-one.
And I want to thank you for both on a personal level helping work through my family's issues, which are just emblematic, I think, of the challenges that the employees of the city have faced in a variety of aspects. And also thank you for the communications that you've conveyed to the employees of the city to help keep them abreast of what's going on and what they need to do to try to minimize the impact that they have to their family's health care.
You're welcome.
I think that we should give low mark to high mark.
Good point. Are there comments from the members of the public? Hearing none, motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.